Welcome back. Here with Let's Stay Rich. We've spoken extensively with Mumbai City's KEEGAN Perreira and our experts Prashant Joshi of Deutsche Bank and Feroz Aziz of Anand Rathi Private Wealth Management have been tasked with creating the best financial plan for KEEGAN, and that's exactly what they've done. So experts, what does this plan look like?
Yeah, to start with his goals. So the more important goals, wedding is his short-term goal, medium-term, house, travel, and the sports bike, of course. Long-term goal, retirement corpus, and the corpus which will actually fund your restaurant, and children's education and marriage. So these are your goals. On the allocation side, where do you actually invest your money? Equity should take 70% of the money. And in equity, a large portion of that 70%, which is 40%, should go into a large cap fund and a 30% in the mid cap fund. So then move on to the debt side. 20% of your money in the debt funds, which is long-term debt funds, the funds which actually have a 3-year kind of a time frame, which is about 10%. And in the PPF, you can continue investing 10% of your money. Then moving on to real estate. From a consumption perspective, the real estate, of course, is there. From an investment perspective, it is nil. Precious metal, looking at the situation, precious metal is nil. Precious metal, gold and silver, that's what I mean. Insurance will take about 2% of your total salary, in which 1.5% to the term plan and 0.5% to health insurance. Then from a liability perspective, like Prashant recommended in the previous segment, buy yourself a house, and then the home loan installments will start. That will take away about 40,000 rupees a month to actually repay the loan and the EMI, and the car loan which you existingly have, that's about 11,000 rupees.
We've discussed many of the details beforehand about what he needs and so on and so forth, but why have we chosen to give this kind of allocation?
I think there are two reasons. One is that the fact is that he has got 10 of his most productive years ahead of him.
Okay.
And he needs to make the most of those years, for the remaining part of his life. So that was one dominant consideration. And the second, of course, is that he needs protection as well as growth, both. So with all the insurances and the investment in the house, you ensure yourself a good backup protection. And then, because he needs to build his retirement corpus, either for education, retirement, or for setting up his restaurant, he needs to invest in an instrument, which grows and beats inflation consistently.
Right.
And which is why 70%, of his earnings we would like to put into equity mutual funds within that large cap and mid cap. And because they would grow much faster, he would get the benefit of compounding. And that's the reason why we have chosen to skew the plan more towards equities.
Right.
But at the same time have sufficient backups in place for him were something to go wrong.
What do you mean by debt funds?
Right. Like Feroz said, when you invest in equity funds, you are partnering a company. When you invest in a debt fund, you are actually investing in funds which give loans to companies, right? So there are good companies who borrow, and these mutual funds go and give them loans. They also invest in government securities, so which is basically government borrowing the money. And the debt funds do not partner the companies or the governments, but they actually loan to good quality companies.
So there any risk in all this?
If the markets fall, of course, if you look at the value, it will look lower, but it automatically comes back up again if you give it some time. So risk is notional as long as you have time in your favor. Looking at your age, you have enough time. Of course, looking at your career, you have not more than 10-12 years from a career perspective, but that's good enough from an equity investment standpoint.
All right, so with that, let's present KEEGAN's financial plan to him, and the hope is that KEEGAN, you'll study this whenever you have time off from football, and that this will actually help you in becoming a wiser investor, not just a wise spender. All right, thanks very much, KEEGAN, for joining in, and all the very best for your ongoing season, and we hope to see you star in many, many, many matches going forward. Thanks very much. Feroz, Prashant, thanks very much for your time, and thanks for being a part of this initiative and for actually indulging us in helping football players do better, not just on the field, but off the field as well. With that, we'll wrap up on this episode, but here's what else you can look out for. Thanks for watching.